A crazy day yesterday in Blue Jays land with the trade and everything that goes along with that. But also, the Toronto Blue Jays bring back Yimi Garcia?
You are Locked On Blue Jays, your daily Toronto Blue Jays podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to Locked On Blue Jays. Thank you for making Locked On Blue Jays your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, out on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. As always, I'm Braden Iwasco. He's Carter First. You can find us on Twitter, Braden5 Iwasco, Carter First too, as well on Instagram and TikTok at Locked On Blue Jays as well. If you're new here to YouTube or you're listening anywhere else, we'd appreciate it if you went over to the YouTube page, you dropped the subscription. We've sort of made it the hub where you can get videos, live streams, podcasts, shorts, everything in between. So make sure you drop that subscription. It's free. You might as well do so. Keeps us at the top of your page. Keeps you guys up to date on all Blue Jays information. As well, Discord link is down in the description. Some stuff to get into today. We went over the trade. Probably too much. Carter was live for about an hour and 45 minutes. I was on periodically. We did yesterday's podcast, sort of giving our final thoughts, what we actually sort of, after we had time to digest everything, how we felt about it all. And we brought up the Yimi Garcia stuff yesterday, but we didn't want to dive too deep into it because we felt like, we could wait and have a bigger discussion on Yimi Garcia in the bullpen. So that's what we're going to do today. And then we'll sort of just get into the sort of the week as it is. Where does this leave the Blue Jays a little bit more going into, tomorrow's Friday? Well, at the end of the week, will anything happen over the weekend? We'll get into all that as well. But Carter, let's kick things off. How do you feel about Yimi Garcia returning to the Toronto Blue Jays?
You can't hate on it whatsoever. Our team was better, obviously, after this signing than it was before the Yimi Garcia signing. This is why that we were advocating so heavily about the trade deadline, being like, hey, we got anyone that is on an expiring contract, we got to get them out of here. We got to get any sort of prospects back, get anything in return, because if they're going to hit the free agent market, you can just bring them back anyway. So if you can get any sort of thing for any of these players, whether, again, it was Trevor Richards at that time, Yusei Kikuchi, Danny Jansen, just to name a few, obviously Yimi Garcia being one of them as well. If we can get any sort of prospects with not a very good prospect pool, any sort of bolstering of that prospect pool is going to be beneficial for the Toronto Blue Jays. And they make the Yimi Garcia trade. They trade Yimi Garcia away for Jonathan Clase and Jacob Sharp. And Clase, with that speed profile, with how quick he is, that isn't something you can teach, obviously. So if he can, again, you got to work on a lot of things. He's still a younger player. If he can make that transition in the big leagues and just have any sort of service time for the MLB team, that's going to be a trade that the Toronto Blue Jays won, especially when they get Yimi Garcia back on a 2-year, $15 million deal. The crazy thing for me was that they kind of chose Yimi Garcia over Jordan Romano in this sense. Jordan Romano's projected arbitration was 7.75. Yimi Garcia getting $7.5 billion per year. We did see Yimi Garcia kind of in that closer role a little bit in 2024 with how the volatility of Jordan Romano couldn't really stay healthy. And again, the elbow, the shoulder injuries, a bunch of stuff to that right. Throwing arm, could not see Jordan Romano as much as we wanted to. So I guess we'll start it with this. Taking Yimi Garcia over Jordan Romano. Do you think that just comes into the certainty for 2025 that comes into play for Yimi Garcia? Or do you think they just simply like the stuff better from Yimi Garcia? What do you think went into that decision for the Toronto Blue Jays front office?
Yeah, I really don't know what to say about this. This is concerning for me. I think that I would have liked to see Jordy come back, especially only, an extra 200 or what would it be? $250,000 on top of it. I don't know. I think you keep Jordy around, Canadian guy. Everybody loves him. He's been with this team forever. I don't really understand this move. They must have seen something in Yimi Garcia that wasn't there for Jordan Romano. Maybe it's consistency. I don't necessarily know. I'm not in those meetings. I love Yimi Garcia. I do. Me and you talked about this all last season about how good he was and what we think he could bring to the table, especially when he was, in that closing role. I really did like him. But do I think that he's an absolute game changer, that a guy that people are going to be afraid to see at the plate in the ninth inning? No. Were guys scared of Jordan Romano? No. But you also have seen what Jordy can do. And I think that that's in some batters' heads. Yimi isn't a proven closer, so if that's the role he's going to take, which we'll get into that, then I'm a little bit concerned because I don't see many more bullpen signings here this offseason. I don't think it's going to happen. I think they've sort of have the cast that they want. Yeah, maybe a couple just whatever guys, shot in the darks, whatever. But I think for bigger tier guys, I think this is it. This is who we're running. We're running Yimi Garcia, we're running Chad Green, and we're running Erik Swanson. So I don't know how I feel about it. I don't know what went into the decision. I would assume it's just a little bit injury concerned about if Jordy would go down again. And for Yimi Garcia, I think it's maybe, I guess it's pieces in together with that injury stuff. But the consistency, I think you know what you were going to get out of Yimi. He's not going to be a game breaker, but he's not going to cost you too much either, which I think is definitely a pro for Yimi Garcia.
There's a lot of things to consider when you're talking about Yimi Garcia and Jordan Romano. The first thing that is glaringly obvious to me is that Yimi Garcia has more of that traditional pitch mix, has more of that starter sort of oriented mix, whereas Jordan Romano obviously just being a fastball slider guy. Yimi Garcia has 5 pitches, technically has 6, but really only uses 5. 4-seam, curveball, sinker, sweeper, and then does have the changeup. Does mix the slider in from time to time. Don't really see him throwing that nearly as often. So it's interesting because you would have to think, and on the surface, you would think it's Jordan Romano not coming back is all injury scathed. It's like, oh, the elbow is completely shot. There's going to be some problems there. His projected arbitration with the Blue Jays was $7.75 million. He signed an $8.5 million deal with the Philadelphia Phillies. And Ross Atkins went out in his press conferences and said there was never an issue with health when it comes to Jordan Romano. It was just, it must not have been a good fit. He pretty much left it at that, just saying it wasn't a health concern. Didn't really go into what the concerns were for Jordan Romano, but now you got to speculate that it maybe has a little bit to do with that pitch mix. A lot of Toronto Blue Jays fans were saying that Jordan Romano was a fake closer. We were never really on that fence whatsoever. Again, you do want a closing pitcher with more than 2 pitches most of the time, but you saw how effective Jordan Romano was. I don't think that's necessarily a problem. So it's still just very unclear why they did go with Yimi Garcia over Jordan Romano. You would think that it would be because of the certainty with Yimi Garcia compared to Jordan Romano. Yimi Garcia, again, was hurt at the end of last season as well. Got put on the 60-day IL with the Seattle Mariners, but obviously had no surgeries, had no major injuries in that sort as well. And when you get Yimi Garcia coming back for this next upcoming season with the Toronto Blue Jays, he was unbelievable. Had like a 2.7 ERA. Was one of the best relievers, honestly, throughout April and May. He started to kind of go back to his regular self in June and July, obviously being traded in July. But with Yimi Garcia, I don't know how necessarily comfortable I would be if we're running a Yimi Garcia, Chad Green, kind of supposed to splitting that closing role. So if we're looking for a closing pitcher on the Toronto Blue Jays, when we're talking about Yimi Garcia, I don't know how confident I can necessarily be with Yimi Garcia having that role. But at the end of the day, the bullpen did get better. Signing Yimi Garcia rather than doing nothing and kind of waiting on this trial and error process that we do think is inevitably going to come to the Toronto Blue Jays anyway.
Yeah, to me, this is a complete gut feeling thing for the Toronto Blue Jays. They had a gut feeling that Yimi Garcia was going to have a better season than Jordan Romano. And like we always talk about, Ross Atkins needed to make something work. And if he's going to trust his gut, then he's going to trust his gut. No, there's not going to be anybody that's going to tell him, you could throw all the stats at him in the world, but if he's going to be a gut trust guy, then that's who he's going to be. Just a couple things I want to go into, Carter, just some glaring things from Yimi Garcia, good and bad, I guess. Just looking, I love to do this when we talk pitchers. Baseball Savant is a great page, and I like to see where their hot zones are for their pitches. What pitch is the trouble pitch? What pitch can get these pitchers into trouble? Yimi Garcia's fastball is pretty consistently, he uses it high. He doesn't pitch a low fastball, which is a good thing because he's got so many other pitches that can be utilized down in the zone. The one glaring issue that I saw with Yimi Garcia was his curveball. His curveball doesn't get low enough. And it's not okay. You can't leave it bottom to middle of the zone. That's going to get beaten up on. So that's my one thing with Yimi Garcia. The sinker is awesome. He throws a great sinker. Where he utilizes the sinker is very, very good to see. And the sweeper, he uses the sweeper very, very effectively. And Carter, the changeup as well doesn't get low enough for me. So it's that curveball and that changeup that I think can get Yimi Garcia into some trouble. But the way he utilizes pitches, I think what we saw with the Toronto Blue Jays is he goes off of pitches very well. So if he throws that high fastball, he'll start that curveball in the same position, which then, some people might say, oh, he's getting lucky. That curveball's sitting in the middle of the zone. Why isn't it getting beaten up on? It's because he's playing it off of that high fastball, and he's starting that curveball where the fastball finishes, dropping it in. And that's what's making the guy miss. So it could be a pitch mix thing here, Carter. And I know you brought that up in the comparisons with him and Jordan Romano. This could be just a pitch mix thing. If you're going to see teams all the time, especially teams like the Yankees and the Red Sox and the Orioles, I mean, those are three teams that they're going to see your closer quite often. So you need guys with other stuff that isn't just a two-pitch guy that, isn't going to work. So I think in my head, that's the only thing that makes sense here to me, why they went Yimi Garcia over Jordan Romano.
Yeah, it's just a predictability thing. When we were sitting on the couch watching Jordan Romano all the time, we were saying on the couch what he was going to throw. It was working a lot of the time, so you can't really have a problem with it when things are being effective and they're working. But if we could obviously predict it on the couch, I think that was something that other teams are starting to pick up on. And you're obviously just so limited when you only have a fastball and a slider. Part of the reason I think they did decide to go with Yimi Garcia, I don't know, I wouldn't say this is an overpay. I would say it's a pretty fair contract for a guy like Yimi Garcia, is there's a lot of familiarity there for the Toronto Blue Jays. And we talk about how uncertain this offseason is. I think Yimi Garcia is one of those certain players. When you look at his tenure with the Toronto Blue Jays, obviously coming in 2022, the ERAs, 3.10, 4.09, 3.46 over those last three seasons, 61 innings pitched, 66 in 2023. Last season, obviously dealt with a little bit of injuries, things like that at 39. You just go over a lot of these numbers, and they're pretty consistent for a guy like Yimi Garcia. So that is obviously going to play it into his strengths. One thing with Yimi Garcia, coming off of 2023, they said he didn't have that good of a year in 2023. Again, this is kind of Yimi Garcia standards. Still had a pretty good year for a bullpen arm, but you really noticed last season that the command was there. You kind of touched on how good his fastball looked. He used it high up in the zone, and that was one pitch that I noticed right away, that when Yimi Garcia is commanding that fastball, obviously it being a higher velocity fastball, consider around 96, 97 miles per hour. Sometimes you even get up to that 99 miles per hour. If you have that as an effective pitch and you are locating that pitch, a lot of very good pitchers throughout history have said if you have a good fastball, you can almost just pitch with the fastball. If you have a good commanded fastball, then obviously you still have to throw it fairly hard. But with Yimi Garcia, velocity isn't necessarily a problem. So you talked about that curveball as well. A curveball is kind of a tough pitch to throw at that bottom of the zone because you still want it to be competitive, but obviously you don't want to hang the curveball. You much rather throw a curveball in the dirt rather than leaving a curveball over the middle of the plate. But it's a very finicky pitch. You hold on to the ball for half a second too long. You're throwing it in the dirt. It's not a competitive pitch. People aren't going to swing at that. But then you get vice versa. You hold on to it, you release it a little bit too early, then it can hang in the middle of the zone. So obviously that is something that Yimi Garcia would need to work on for a little bit of this offseason. One thing that may be a focus for Yimi Garcia with how good his sinker looked, playing off the changeup as well. If he can still work that sinker in the bottom of the zone, have that well-commanded fastball, I think a curveball, even if he is throwing it in the dirt more consistently than he is throwing it over the zone, I think with them sitting on that fastball, seeing it at the bottom of the zone and come out like that can obviously help his curveball develop as a pitch for him as well.
Yeah, Carter. And, you sort of touched, we touched on a lot about Yimi Garcia and sort of how he is as a player, what he can bring to the Toronto Blue Jays.
And the people know how Yimi Garcia is because he's been with the Toronto Blue Jays for the last three seasons. So there's really no need to add a ton of new information, like this groundbreaking stuff, because you guys know how Yimi Garcia is as a pitcher.
We've talked about him nonstop over this past year, especially we've only had the podcast this past year. So this past year, more so before when, me and you were just sitting on the couch together. But now we've talked about him quite a bit. You guys know Yimi Garcia. We know Yimi Garcia. Now I think what we have to talk about is how Yimi Garcia signing affects this bullpen and how this bullpen can play out throughout this season with what we've heard, not many more signings to come. So we'll take a quick break. We'll be right back. We'll sort of break down this bullpen, how we can see it moving forward into 2025. Today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5, get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. I've been betting on the NFL every single week. I have a blast with it, and FanDuel is the only place I would go because I know that I can place those live bets. I can see, oh, wow, this guy's having a really good game. I might as well go throw $5 or $10 on him. And now with these bonus bets, you might as well take advantage. Like I said, You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Join today. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. So, Carter, like I said, we've touched on Yimi Garcia, what he is to this team, as much as you guys obviously know as well. Me and Carter have done breakdowns on Yimi Garcia throughout this season, sort of here and there. But let's talk about this bullpen as an entirety, because, I mean, I didn't necessarily expect more. The move was shocking to bring Yimi Garcia back. I was really surprised. But obviously, Ross Atkins has learned from his mistakes about not bringing Teoscar Hernandez back the following season. And I think with the bullpen arm, it is a little bit easier to do so. But Carter, how do you feel about this being it for the bullpen?
I gotta hope that it's not. You gotta assume and you gotta hope that they're going to add a high leverage starter, or a high leverage bullpen arm, I should say. Are they going to do that? Is Yimi Garcia going to be it? And one negative thing you could associate with Yimi Garcia is saying, oh, the Toronto Blue Jays had a bottom 5 bullpen, bottom 3 bullpen last season. Yimi Garcia was right in the mix of that. How is bringing another guy back from a bullpen that was horrific going to solve the problems for 2025? And Yimi Garcia by himself, I don't know if he does solve the bullpen problems for 2025. Because you look at Yimi Garcia, and he was not a problem in this bullpen in 2024 whatsoever. He was probably the best bullpen arm during his Toronto Blue Jays tenure during that time. Maybe him and Chad Green you can make the argument with. But going over the current structure of this bullpen right now, you would have Chad Green, you'd have Erik Swanson, and you'd have Yimi Garcia as kind of your top 3 guys. These would be the guys that were battling for that closing role. Right now, in this example, assuming that they're not adding to the Toronto Blue Jays bullpen. So then you'd have Brendan Little, who's kind of in his own tier, a guy that we do trust, don't necessarily want as the highest leverage guy on this team. But if he is in your bullpen, you're not going to be too worried about that. Nick Sandlin, you got to assume, is going to be somewhere in this mix now as well. So that's why that trade does help a little bit here. You got Zach Pop, who you did not non-tender, which was a little bit of a surprise to us as well. You got him probably at number 6. You got Tommy Nance in this bullpen. You got Hagen Dander, Nick Robertson, Brandon Eisert. Like, there's some guys here where you get towards the bottom of this list that you're not going to be confident in rolling back for 2025. There's Michael Stefaniak as well that the Blue Jays claimed, I believe it was from the Marlins. So that guy will be in the mix. But again, if you have a Tanner Scott in this lineup, like ideally a lefty is what we want here. But even if it's not a lefty, even if it's like a Jose Leclerc, a guy from the Texas Rangers who doesn't necessarily carry the biggest dollar figure in free agency, but you gotta be leading to believe that you're going to have to make another move for this bullpen. Ryan Burr's another guy that's probably going to be in there that I did not mention. But is that going to be enough to kind of flip the script? When a lot of these guys were on a bullpen last season, that was one of the worst in all of baseball.
So let me float this out here. The Blue Jays are heavily linked to Corbin Burns. We know that, right? We don't know if it's going to happen, but we know they're heavily linked. If they get Corbin Burns, that probably sends a couple of those guys now to the bullpen. Example, Yariel Rodriguez. He finds a spot as probably one of your longer relief guys. You have to expect that Erik Swanson has a big bounce back year. I think me and you were both expecting that. I think a lot of Blue Jays fans wrote him off too early last year. We know he's a good bullpen arm. We know he can get back to there, and I think he will. For a bounce back candidate, he's got to be up there in probably top 3 for next season. So in saying both of that, does adding Yariel Rodriguez and Erik Swanson being back to normal Erik Swanson, does that make enough of a difference? I'm almost led to believe, I sort of want to say almost, I think.
Yeah, I don't know if it does. Like, I don't know if that's going to be, it's going to make a difference for sure, but is it enough? I feel like the Toronto Blue Jays, they're not exactly going out there and trying to have a top 10 bullpen when things went so horrifically wrong. And you see like kind of what happens even from the last year's bullpen. You looked at how Tim Meza was in 2023, how he performed in 2024. He might not even have a job on a major league team in 2025. That's how big of a dip off that he did have. Again, you got to assume Erik Swanson bouncing back is going to have an impact on your bullpen. But who's to say that Yimi Garcia with the Toronto Blue Jays, 2.7 ERA, went to the Seattle Mariners, did fight with some injuries, but had a 6 ERA over there. So are you going to expect the same sort of year from Yimi Garcia? I think you can expect a little bit of regression there. Brendan Little, not a guy that's had a lot of MLB service time. Is this going to be a guy that you can rely on? Again, you're hoping that he can take some strides here, but there's still a lot of uncertainty. Nick Sandlin, again, as a low leverage guy, sure. Is this guy you want to roll out in the 7th inning? I don't necessarily think so. So is it going to be enough? It's definitely going to be enough to make the bullpen better, but is it going to be enough to make the Blue Jays a playoff team? Is it going to be enough that the Blue Jays can rely on their bullpen going into 2025. Yariel Rodriguez, again, a little bit of a question mark there. I think him out of the bullpen probably suits him a little bit better. I think he would be one of those higher leverage guys that you probably could rely on. If he needs to throw 2 innings, obviously can do that. Even 3 innings probably in some scenarios. With him still being stretched out, you probably can throw Yariel Rodriguez. But for me, I think there still needs to be one more move. Doesn't necessarily have to be the Tanner Scotts, the Carlos Estevez, the Jeff Hoffmans. But it could be like a Jose Leclerc. I loved Jonathan Loáisiga. Obviously went to the New York Yankees. The Jays were heavily linked to him as well. That's not going to happen. But I think there does need to be at least one more signing of a guy that's not necessarily the best of the best out there, but that has shown throughout history and throughout his MLB career that he can be an effective reliever.
This is where I'm at. I think it needs to be, because we've heard that they're not going out to make a big signing. It might be some little pieces, but that's about it. I'm thinking it needs to be a serviceable lefty. That's where I'm at. This team needs another serviceable lefty. As much as, we talk about Brendan Little and maybe he can, bring something to the table, this team needs something else. Somebody else that's serviceable from that left side, because I mean, if a team knows that you're just going to roll out and throw righties consistently and not having to adjust lineups because of it, that's an issue. You want teams to have to do a little bit of thinking mid-game and, they could bring that guy to the pen. Are we scared of that guy? And then I think your 7, 8, 9 innings are pretty locked up. I think you have your Erik Swanson. Ideally, if he goes back to being Erik Swanson, that's great. You have either Chad Green or Yimi Garcia to cap it off, and then you save the one for the next game. I think it's set up nicely. The issue is, because again, we always talk about how good this starting rotation is, where you're going to start to see the problems are in the games where guys only go 3 innings, 4 innings. That's going to be the issue, because can Yariel Rodriguez go out there and throw 3.5? Can Sandlin go out and throw a few? It's going to see how we're going to have to see, are these guys 1 inning guys or can they go multiple? Because sometimes you're going to need them to go multiple innings, and can they survive in this league? That's my biggest question mark there.
Well, and one guy we haven't really talked about, if you want a left-hander on your team that is capable of going multiple innings, it's Ryan Yarbrough is looking you right in your face. And this is a guy that's not going to be $6-7 million. You're probably going to be able to get this guy for probably a 1-year, $4 million contract. If that's going to be a reliable bullpen arm, we saw it last season, like around the 3.5, 3.70 ERA, whatever it was. It's not, his numbers aren't flashing off the page and screaming at you. And obviously with the velo, things like that as well. You're really just going after the consistency. You're going after that longer reliever for your bullpen. And you're looking at what he has done over his career, and that has been an effective reliever for even your Blue Jays in the back half of 2024. Ryan Yarbrough was one of the only bullpen arms that, if any, that you could rely on in the second half of 2024. And if you're looking for a relatively cheap option that you are familiar with, which Ross Atkins has gone out with, Yimi Garcia said he was in, and Jordan Romano has almost made it look like he'd rather sign a guy that he is more familiar with. We'll throw it back to Aaron Sanchez. You want to go there as well. Probably shouldn't have given him a chance, but did go out and sign him as well to a minor league deal. So he has shown, and with Teoscar Hernandez as well, we'll talk about these reunions. So he has shown that guys that have been familiar with Toronto Blue Jays that he has seen play before do have a fair shot of coming back. So maybe Ryan Yarbrough should be an option that Ross Atkins does look at if he doesn't want to break the bank.
I like that a lot. We might get some hate from people listening, because I know there were some people that really didn't like him. But I was totally fine with him. I think for the role that is needed this season, I think bringing him back on a cheap contract would not hurt this team whatsoever. So I think that's a decent move, Carter. You know what? I want to take a break because I want to go into a little bit the crazy week that was, but I also have a little bit of we'll call it a question day. It was something just sort of popped into my head the other day that I've sort of been hanging on to. So we'll have some fun in this next segment. We'll take a quick break and be right back. Today's episode brought to you by Game Time. You guys know I talk about Game Time all the time because they are my favorite place to get tickets. They have their new feature called Game Time Picks. It makes it even easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, sort of whatever you want to get tickets to. They have their all-in pricing. Toggling this feature will show you the total upfront with no surprise fees at the checkout. One of my biggest pet peeves when I go to buy tickets is I want to know what I'm paying before I have to click submit. And I go to the checkout. I know exactly what I'm paying. It makes it super easy and convenient. They have their seat views where you can get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. Also, they have the lowest price guarantee, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. Okay, Carter, we'll get into the week that was to sort of wrap this up because it was a lot in like a, 4-hour span the other day. But this is the question I wanted to come at you with here. We've heard Ross Atkins do some talking to the media. We've heard John Schneider do the same. My question is, I think the hate has died down towards John Schneider, especially over this offseason. I think everything's being placed on Ross Atkins. What I want to know is the dislike towards John Schneider for you, is that gone, chilled out? Where are you standing with him right now?
Yeah, this is a guy that we were talking about. Like, it seemed like exclusively at the start of 2024 when you had George Springer at the start of that lineup. But as we saw for the 2024 Toronto Blue Jays, you could have put anyone in the leadoff spot in that lineup, and it probably wouldn't have mattered too much for the team's success in that year. When you go back to obviously other years, you go to the playoffs, you go to like the Jose Berrios polling, doesn't really make a lot of sense there. You go Yusei Kikuchi when Berrios is having one of the best outings of his year. Again, you have bullpen decisions, things like that. There has been a lot of inconsistencies with John Schneider, but I think it's be definitely unfair to say that it hasn't died off in the last year, because you look at how bad the team was in 2024 and you look at some of the decisions that he was forced to choose from. Was it throwing in Addison Barger, or was it throwing in Leo Jimenez in your ninth batting order spot? So you didn't really have a lot to play with a lot of these scenarios, but that's not completely letting him off the hook. I think if the Toronto Blue Jays are competitive in 2024, he's probably under the spotlight a lot more heavily than he was realistically in 2024 with how the team panned out. So I don't think he should be completely off the hook. But for me personally, I think due to recency bias with how the team was, you can't really be too upset with John Schneider for what happened in 2024. But you can definitely be at least proceed with caution. We've seen the history of John Schneider and some of the question marks decisions he has made, and just some of the iffy decisions he's made in this Blue Jays tenure.
Yeah, that's sort of how I feel too. Is I don't think it's just not at the surface right now. I've pushed it down because they're more pressing matters, but. Yeah, 2024 was tough for this team. And I mean, it was tough for management. It was tough for everybody. I mean, the fans especially, and especially the players. So, yeah, there wasn't many options. You couldn't really be mad at them, because if I was out there, I don't know what I would have done. It was a bad team. The team was pretty terrible. So I really can't say too much on him right now. But I think if we go into next year and we start to see those tendencies of not knowing what to do, pulling guys early, not stealing a bag when the bag should be stolen, some weird stuff going on with John Schneider, weird decision moves in the bullpen, I think that it'll rocket right to the top, and I'll be complaining about it on here once again. So yeah, I don't know. I just wanted a quick little answer. I know we'll probably talk about him more throughout the offseason when the season starts to kick off. But I guess, Carter, just to reflect on the crazy week that was, we're almost at Friday. We've seen a trade. We've seen a signing. I know you were calling for stuff to happen, and here we are. Stuff has happened. So how do you feel? Just looking back, how do you feel?
Yeah, definitely got stuff to happen. That's for sure. I got my transactions. Didn't again. I kind of left field with a lot of them. Didn't expect Yimi Garcia to be coming back. Don't expect Spencer Horwitz being traded, especially the Guardians. Then 3 hours later, I think he was a Guardian for 3 hours. Then gets flipped to the Pittsburgh Pirates, and then obviously the Juan Soto stuff happening on Sunday. That was a lot easier to anticipate, because it seemed like there's a little bit of a build up to that, and we did expect there to be some transactions. But it's been an absolutely wild week in Toronto Blue Jays land. And I guess Cleveland Guardians land, as they just, again, making multiple trades in a couple hours as well. But before we do head out, we're talking a lot about reunions for the Toronto Blue Jays. Yimi Garcia coming back, being in on Jordan Romano, Teoscar Hernandez. There are a couple players that are available on the free agent market for the Toronto Blue Jays to bring back. The number one guy that I have right here, if we want to live a little bit in 2021, is Adam Simber. Is a free agent that is available. How do you think that he would fit in the 2025 Toronto Blue Jays bullpen?
I was going to use another word, but I'll say absolutely not instead. That would really upset me. I do not want to see that guy anywhere near the Toronto Blue Jays. Bullpen, no thanks. Come again.
I mean, we got Tim Meza here. That's another option. Trent Thornton, maybe we bring him back he had a good year at the Mariners in 2024. Yeah, like I said, Meza's there. Ross Stripling, another guy. Start bringing him back. If we want runs, we said we want offense. Wouldn't help the Jays offense, but you have Adam Zimmer in a game, you're going to get some offense. I'll tell you that for free. But realistically, again, like it's either do you want to take a shot on one of these guys, or do you rather at least have an unfamiliar face and bring them in? Maybe if they're equally skilled as a guy like Adam Zimmer, at least at that point, it instills a little bit of false hope in you, and you don't have to rely on 84 miles per hour fastball Adam Zimmer coming from that right side.
Give me anybody else. Honestly, give me him and Tim Meza. I never want to see put on another Blue Jays jersey. Tim Meza was a weird one though. It was so up and down. I hated him. Then I'm like, okay, is he figuring out? And then I hated him again. So and not as a person, as a baseball player. Don't get me wrong. Adam Zimmer, I just didn't like forever. He was just never good. So no thanks. Yeah, funny. That's a hilarious thing to bring up at the end of a podcast. You're going to leave me with thoughts of Adam Zimmer and Tim Meza? That's brutal.
Hey, I mean, we've been discussing a bad bullpen for pretty much an entire year. So you want to talk about bad bullpen arms? That is the thing we are definitely familiar with in Toronto Blue Jays land. But yeah, I guess we'll leave it at that. We'll leave you with Adam Zimmer, Tim Meza as being the keys to the bullpen maybe for 2025. I also thought Trevor Richards was like one of the worst pitchers of all time. And then, kind of showed some flashes. But then you see Trevor Richards give up a 450-foot moon ball. And you're like, oh yeah, that's probably why I didn't like this guy too much. But we'll leave it at that. Thank you guys for watching. The likes, comments, everything recently. The news, even for Toronto Blue Jays media, recently has been appreciated. So we'll give a shout out to the Blue Jays for that, just giving us something to talk about. It was a little bit of a dry November. So definitely heating up in terms of just content and stuff to talk about for December. We have noticed that about 68% of you guys are not subscribed. So you guys are coming back, tuning into the podcast, the shorts, the live streams, you name it. Helps us out a ton and also keeps our videos at the top of your guys' pages. But yeah, I just hope for some more transactions. Now you got me fired up. You got me going here. I don't want to be edged a little. I don't want to be edged at all here. Like just let's get the transactions that keep on coming here. Let's get a corner outfielder. Let's get an actual power bat that can help the Toronto Blue Jays actually have some offensive success. We're addressing the bullpen. Let's address the offense as well.
Thanks for watching, guys. Talk to you tomorrow.